Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the April edition of Molten Music Monthly. It's a whole nother month, I can't quite believe it, but the sun is shining, which means perhaps it's actually kind of like spring working towards summer. I mean, that would be quite exciting. Now, I have shed loads of stuff to get through today. We have Super Booth on the horizon. A whole bunch of stuff has turned up, and I am frankly quite snowed in with boxes and bits. I've got all sorts of things to show you and to spend time on, and so I think I'm going to skip my little witty intro that I normally do and just get straight on with it. So probably the biggest splash this month was the Astrolab from Arturia. It landed in that way that we all really relish, which is a whole gamut of YouTube synthfluencers dumping a bunch of release day videos on us. It's fabulous. We just lap it up one after the other. Yeah, another one. Yeah, another one. Let's have another one. Woo! It's a big party time and everyone just has a fabulous time. Well, I'm not going to dwell on that because I didn't have one, and so I've got no skin in the game as far as release day videos go for the Astrolab. But it does bring up the conversation again as to whether that's a really great idea or not. It seems to be that a whole bunch of people moan about it. Every time we have a big product release and there's a bunch of videos, that really puts a bunch of people's noses out of joint. And I can never quite work out why. I mean, it does have this sense that it's a little bit tasteless, that there's some kind of feeding frenzy going on which doesn't feel particularly awesome. But from a YouTuber's point of view, I mean, essentially if a manufacturer is going to use YouTubers rather than actually come up with the money to make their own adverts, then they have to be fair and they have to give everyone an equal shot at getting those views, because on that release day, at that release time, those views are going to be maximized. And ultimately for YouTubers, it's all about the views. Now, on the other hand, as a viewer, who gives a monkeys about any of that? You just want good information and a good video on a good product. You don't care about whose channel it is or whose views are getting what or what the metrics are like. And so perhaps the whole story of release day videos gets a little bit overplayed, because really it only affects a very small number of people. But from a YouTuber's perspective, it is very nice to be involved in that release day stuff and to have a video out there that everyone is making a big fuss about. That is lovely. I've certainly experienced the thing where you release a video later, like with the Tiger Keys I've got sitting over there. I wasn't able to get a video together for release day, so I did my review a little bit later on and felt completely fine about that. But honestly, the views I've had are probably a lot less than I would have done had I got it out there with the main thrust. So there is something in that. How do we get around that? I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I feel that saving everything up for the big announcement, for a big release day, is not the way to do it. Maybe show your product, make your own video, show your product, and then farm it out to a few people to make videos on it. Maybe that's a better way rather than having this big launch. Maybe. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but there is something that I think narks us about those big slew of videos. Don't know. Anyway, back to the product at large, the Astrolab. Was it the most fantastic thing ever? It's alright. It looks nice. It's got this big circular sort of washing machine dial in the middle, which is fabulous. General idea is, I believe, is that it's a hardware host for all of Arturia's instruments. So you get about 34 classic, very well made software instruments that Arturia make. Those are dragged into the Astrolab keyboard and you can play them direct from there without having to be connected to a computer. Great, bravo! That's an awesome thing. The only downside is that you have bugger all ability to edit those sounds once it's on the Astrolab. You've got a few macro knobs and that kind of thing for changing filters and changing bits and pieces, but you can't actually edit or do any sound design on the keyboard itself. That all has to be reflected back into the software, you do it in the software, blah, 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 and then you dump it back across to the keyboard. There's not even any sort of real-time reflection in the software to keyboard kind of thing. You do your edits and then you send it back. However, if ultimately what you're looking for is a bunch of these sounds for your stage, for your performance, for your playing live keyboard, then sounds pretty perfect, really, isn't it? I mean, I guess it's like having a Kronos or a Motif or something, some big keyboard that's got all those synth sounds in that you need, but this is allowing you to access all of those vintage synths and cool stuff from Arturia and have it ready at your fingertips for every song, for every patch, ready to go. So yeah, I mean, it's something which is aimed at a slightly different market to your normal MIDI controller and to your normal synth person. It's that person who would probably take a Nord keyboard or some other stage piano on stage. This is the sort of thing that might suit them well. At $15.99, it's certainly not a bargain basement thing, but then it looks very, very well made and is designed to survive the rigours of live performance. From Artium Instruments, we have the Swarm. Swarm is a polyphonic desktop synth, a little box, a little tobacco tin sized synthesizer with effects, with a polyphonic sound engine, ready to go. Polyphony is going to be a bit of a theme. I think there's a lot of it about. In fact, I would recommend you go and check out the Synth Fest France coverage that Tom over at Synth Anatomy has been doing, because there's a lot of crazy synths coming out of that show. Too many for me to cover, really, and a lot of them are in kind of in a prototype state or in a in development state or just a personal project state. But there's a lot of amazing stuff being done with polyphonic synths at this very moment. And this is just one of those. So the Swarm is designed to be one knob per function. Not a whole lot of knobs, but not a whole lot of functions, I guess, in a regular sort of polyphonic synthesizer. It's a super saw, so it's got a sawtooth waveform and is looking to kick out about 8 voices. On the front, you've got a filter, detuning, an arpeggiator, and a bunch of effects. You've got a freeze effect, stereo delay, stereo reverb, that kind of thing. It looks like a fun box. It's there for bringing out a mass of synthesizer sounds as simply and easily and fitherable as possible. Dabbling in the world of software plugins for a moment, we've got one from Dream Audio, and this is the Aura Shape Shifter. Looks totally dazzling, totally amazing in its gorgeous hues of interestingness that just sort of pulls you into this space-age interface. The idea, very simply, is that it's a reverb with multiple planets of engagement. So it comes with a whole bunch of worlds based on impulses, each impulse giving you a different flavour, a different space to inhabit and then shift from one to the other. It's super deep, super delicious, looks fantastic. I just thought this looked amazing and was well worth having a poke around with, because we all like a good reverb. We all like to disappear up some distant ambient trail, and this is the sort of thing that's going to let you do this in buckets. The Cyma Forma ALT is one of those French polyphonic synthesizers I was talking about. This one we have very little information on. It is poised to be rolled out onto Kickstarter later in the month, I think probably just after Superbooth. But this is called ALT, and they're calling it a soundscape synthesizer, and it has quite a unique look to it. It's got this bunch of sliders. It has kind of a transparent top, and then it has this pin matrix to the side. Now, pin matrices tend to make everything slightly more complicated, but also give you a different approach to synthesis that you probably haven't thought of before. So whenever I approach a pin matrix or any kind of matrix mixing, it always ends up in creating results that I hadn't thought of. Things that I wouldn't have patched together normally. It just ends up repatching and experimenting in different ways that perhaps you wouldn't do with a patch cable. Well, apparently it has 5 voices, lots of different waveform shaping possibilities, panning and other stereo shenanigans. It has a Korg MS-20 style filter, which is going to give it a bit of an edge. And of course a whole bunch of modulation to which to justify the pin matrix, which is going to allow you to route everything to everything. That is all we know. Hopefully we'll find out more soon. Behringer had a few things to say this month. First and foremost, the MS-5. Now this, honestly, is a gorgeous looking recreation of the Roland SH5. Classic monophonic synthesizer. In that style that Roland did, when Roland really knew what cool was. They were the epitome of cool. That bunch of synthesizers around the System 100 and the SH bits and pieces before they dove off into other more mainstream stuff. They produced these synthesizers that were just gorgeous. They completely encapsulated the 70s to 80s aesthetic of synthesis, and I think did it beautifully. And so Behringer have come along and said, well, we'll do one of those. And to which the world goes, oh, all right then, that's fine. So it's your standard analog synthesizer fare. You've got a pair of oscillators, you've got a filter, envelope, LFO, and a ring modulator. In fact, you've got a pair of envelopes and a pair of LFOs, so it's got quite a lot going on for it, really. It's a very complete mono synth. It's set up very much like a modular synthesizer with all your different sections, but under a single front panel. You've got multiple waveforms for your LFOs. You have an AR and an ADSR envelope. You've got a noise generator, sample and hold, along with the ring modulator, of course. The MS-5 is designed to emulate the SH5 as close to as possible, including things like tuned transistors and JFET, this, that, and the other going on inside. You've got multiple waveforms, multi-mode filters, everything. I mean, it looks just like a fabulous synthesizer. You know, of all the synthesizers that have come along that Behringer have tackled, this one is probably for me the most gorgeous. But then this kind of happens. I kind of like the Poly D. I mean, I like the form factor. You know, as form factors go, I much prefer this sort of tip-up keyboard affair than their Eurorack, you know, massive synthesizers in a Eurorack format thing. This is, I think, much nicer. It feels like an instrument. It's the sort of thing you could sit on a desktop. Would just be, you know, a lovely thing to have without any doubt. The other thing they did was release their first software synth. It's called Vintage. It's free to anyone, apparently. It did accidentally leak early. It leaked early, and then all their servers crashed because they weren't ready for people downloading it. But now, apparently, it's all right. It's all going now. It's all live. It's all ready to go. And you can get yourself a copy of Vintage, which is supposedly taking in the idea of modeling analog synthesizers. All the analog synthesizers, all the ones you could ever want, all within a single interface in a soft synth on your computer for free. Off you go. In true Behringer fashion, it seems that this looks very, very similar to a couple of other synths. In particular, the analog synth that comes with Ableton Live that was built with applied acoustics. So there's your analog moduling. And the interface is pretty much identical. So, you know, however we feel about Behringer, they are not trying to kid us into believing that they are designing their own stuff. They're just taking the best ideas they can find and providing them to us for next to nothing. All I could do is that. I mean, people have said that it's alright as far as soft synths goes, nothing new, nothing extraordinary. But hey, if it's a free sound source that everyone can use, then that's a great thing. Great, off you go. The final little bit of news in Behringer is they've just released a little audio interface for Eurorack. That could be interesting. This is a 2-channel USB audio interface. It's not really there for sort of DC coupling or running modulation in and out of your system via your computer. It's much more for recording directly into your computer. USB thing to your computer, sound out, sound in, that kind of thing. Useful, I suppose, to some degree. But hey, I'm just here to tell you the news. The Hailstorm from Rainy Day Electronics. Interesting name, interesting vibe, kind of like that. This is a percussion instrument, sits on your desktop, gives you 4 channels of synthesis and or samples, I think, in a really quite nice, touchy-feely, make noisy, I suppose, style interface. So you can get all interactive with its capacitive touch. You have 4 voices of samples, 4 voices of drum synthesis. It has a sequencer. It's all very chainable and adaptable. You can control and record automation as you go through and then launch different patterns and bits and pieces directly from the front end. You can browse through samples. You can automate that as well. You can mute and drop things in, and you can scatter it all about with effects and other bits and pieces. Honestly, it looks like a really neat box. Really nice little thing. Very colourful, very interactive, lots of movement and stuff going on, and a source of really great sounds. The Hailstorm, I think, is about available now for about 500 quid. Oh, I've got planes going overhead now. Right, next up is Tracktion Waveform Pro 13. I've got a lot of time for Waveform. I've reviewed it once or twice, I think, over the years, but it's a deep and interesting DAW. It doesn't do things like everything else, although having said that, in more recent versions it's definitely caught up with a lot of the things that perhaps were a bit too different. But what I've really enjoyed about Waveform is it's got kind of this modular nature inside where you can patch everything together. You can kind of build entire routing algorithms within it. Plugins and instruments and other bits and pieces can all be routed into different places. I really enjoyed the fact that you can drag in LFOs in order to just run any parameter that you like. Rather than having to record every single piece of automation, you can just throw modulation about. And I think that's still pretty unique in DAW terms, and that's a very cool feature. The other thing that it does is that it focuses very much onto clips, and you've got an individual ability to affect and change and edit the behavior of clips on your arrange page. Fascinating. So what's new? Well, probably the biggest thing is the clip launcher, so it can now do all of the Ableton Live kind of stuff. Stick your stuff in, launch your clips, and get into kind of a loop way of working rather than a linear timeline. Along with that, it's included support for all sorts of launch pads and other Ableton style controllers and, pad controller thingies. They've introduced a nice big wavetable synthesizer to beef out their instrument offerings, and they've done a lot of refinement to the user interface just to make it smoother, nicer and more gorgeous to look at, because it hasn't always been gorgeous to look at. It has dragged a bit in the past, but these more recent updates I think have just made it look pretty spectacular. I would really like to get dug in again at some point to give it another go, because there were parts of it, as I say, that were totally inspirational and very, very unique, and other parts which were a little bit hard, a bit of a steep learning curve to get into. Like, you couldn't even start the program. How did you start a new project? Seemed to be the most difficult thing in the world. But hey, times change, things develop, and Tracktion, I think overall, have been doing such a great job in developing this, and also developing, or at least kind of managing or hosting, some other interesting instruments. The latest one is called Myth, and it's again from Dawesome, and this is, I don't know, what is it? Resynthesis is the idea. So it's a paradigm shift, apparently, of dragging and dropping audio that will then be resynthesized by an iris into extraordinary oscillations and weird sounding stuff. It has hundreds of presets, it's got modular things going on, there's AI learning, which of course is a given these days. Trainable resonators, analog filters, or virtual analog filters at any rate. So yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of interesting things. I haven't really looked at that in any depth at all, but it's always exciting when Tracktion release something, because it's going to give you something different and interesting to play with. Now, Dtronics are always up for something interesting, and this time around they've grabbed hold of the Mini-Dext, which is a Raspberry Pi based DX7, or rather 8 DX7s. What do they call that? Oh yeah, the TX816. Oh, something along those lines. One of those weird DX type Yamaha synthesizers. The Mini-Dext took all of that, stuffed it into a bit of ROM onto a Raspberry Pi, and let you play with it. Now, what Dtronics have done is designed a little piece of hardware in which to embed it. To sit this thing inside a box to give you a screen and a way of accessing all of those sounds. And I imagine all of those parameters. Now, it appears to have a single knob that does everything. Now, that just frightens the heck out of me, because we're talking about FM synthesis here, right? FM synthesis, which is renowned for its complexity. I remember my DX100 with its rows and rows of buttons and data slider, button, data slider, button, data slider, shift, button, data slider. So this is going to give us all that through a single knob, is it? Is that a good thing? Well, not exactly, because what they're probably saying is that you should sit it next to their DT7 massive FM programmer. That's going to be the plan. I mean, with the box itself, you can select presets, which, I mean, that's cool by itself because it's got tons and tons of presets in there. You can get directly to the sounds that you would normally be after, get stuck into those, fantastic. But then if you want to program, it's either going to melt your brain or you get some kind of external programmer in order to help you with that. And Dtronics, of course, already has that sort of thing ready to go. So it's a perfect thing for them to do, is to turn the DX7 again back into a little hardware box so that they can then sell their programmers for you to really get into grips with it. Fantastic, good job. Bjooks books, you know, those coffee table books, those patch, tweak, squiggle, there's a Korg book, there's a guitar pedal book, there's a synthesizer book, history of analog bits and pieces, there's a Moog one as well. You know the books, big books by Kim Bjorn. Anyway, they've got a new one, it's all about the Minimoog. They've decided to throw this one on Kickstarter, presumably because they think no one really wants it, or perhaps they're trying to gauge the level of interest, or perhaps, heck, they just need the cash in order to print the thing. Maybe that's much more like it. And of course the Minimoog is iconic. It's an extraordinary instrument that we still seem to have a lot of time and love and good feelings for. And so this is the sort of thing that's going to bring out the entire history and influence and effect that synthesizer has had on our modern times. Fantastic. Great thing to have on your coffee table, great thing to have on the shelf. Good luck with that. It has already reached its goal on Kickstarter, and so it's going to happen. So if you want a copy, just get in there and order it. Elektron have just caused the mass flooding of second-hand markets of the Digitakt because they've just announced the Digitakt II. Can you tell them apart? I can't tell them apart. Elektron Digitakt type products are the kind of one area of music technology that I really haven't had any time in at all. There's nothing about the look or vibe of these boxes that appeals to me. There's nothing on them that I particularly want to do. I understand that they are awesome and they have a dedicated frothing of the mouth kind of fan base. That's fine, and I'm sure it would be great. You know, multi-channels of sample synthesizer based kind of sequencing, groove boxy kind of stuff. Oh yeah, fantastic. I'm sure it is. And then version 2 is bound to be twice as good. Let's hope that it's not just a slight expansion in memory. Let's hope that they have like a different coloured button. Oh, I think they do. I think they've added an orange button. I mean, that's quite fun. So the original Digitakt was 8 tracks. This is 16 tracks. Oh, it has many times the power to fill you full of quizzical and impenetrable icons and stuff on the screen which you're never going to work your way around, but hey, there's a lot more of it to cope with, so it's going to keep you even busier than it ever did before. I think the theme with the 2 generally is just doubling everything. Just make everything twice as good, and perhaps that's not a bad idea because I've seen a lot of people use 2 Digitakts in live performance, and so evidently the 8 tracks that it can offer you is not quite enough. So maybe the Digitakt II is the thing that's going to solve that problem, to bring everything together into a single device that can genuinely run your entire live performance. Yeah, sounds pretty cool. From the fabulous French company that is Kaona, we have the Zazou. Zazou. Is it like Zagazoo? Anyone read Zagazoo? That's just the most fantastic book, I think, in the world. Anyway, the Zazou, this is, or looks very much like the companion to the Skippy. The Skippy, I really liked the Skippy. It had this gorgeous circular screen for step sequencing and other Euclidean rhythms and bits and pieces. Fabulous looking module. This appears to be an extension, not an extension exactly, but a companion to that kind of module. It has, again, a circular screen, this time looking like a Simon. So maybe it comes with a bit of a game to play. I don't know. But Zazou is a generator module. The idea is that it can generate melodies, songs, with also a little bit of jazz. It uses all sorts of advanced algorithms to generate generative melodies and bits and pieces, and can run over CV or MIDI. It will improvise for you and take you down to those dusty underground coffee shops where you can sit back and listen to a master work their instrument, all without you having to do anything. It uses all sorts of ways of generating the sound. You give it a scale and a root note, for instance, and then it does randomization, or it might do it through mathematics. It might take an exploration through fractals, or just good old-fashioned sort of Turing machine kind of kind of stuff. It's just going to give you randomization, man. That's what it is. All of this talk about improvisation, it's just random, man. You just throw in a bit of a sample and hold, and it's a new sound, it's a new sound, it's a new thing, it's following a thing. Off it goes, it generates. But what Kaona are saying is that this is all going to be contained and controlled and served up to you as this awesome improvisational generative source of melody and extraordinary vibes. It's certainly very colourful and absolutely the perfect companion to Skippy that can be sorting out all your rhythms over here while this is doing your other thing. In fact, you could probably just plug both of them in and just leave it running. I think that's probably the best way forward. Take the human out of the equation, that's what I say. I have a couple of new modules from the brilliantly named BlakNblue Modular. I've got them over here. One here. These are extraordinary. I mean, look at the size of these things. BlakNblue, the foxtrot. What on earth is a foxtrot? Foxtrot is, let me think, it's 4 filters. So it's a quad filter module. And each filter can be one of 3 types. Switch on here somewhere. You can either be a ladder, you can be an MS-20, or you can be a SEM filter. So that's pretty much all the filters. It's only really missing a Roland one, I suppose. But in terms of usefulness within your rack, I mean, you are filtered up to the nines. You have every form, every thought, every kind. You've got both edge and gorgeousness, gooiness, and falling apartness. You've got well-behaved going through to crazy self-oscillation, all within this extraordinarily, luxuriously big module. I mean, this is seriously eating up your HP in quite an elegantly produced module. You can either use them individually or you can link them together in parallel and ultimately have them all completely controlled from a single CV input. That is the foxtrot. The other one, similarly impressive looking, is a quad VCA. Not quite so as exciting perhaps as a quad filter, but obviously using the two together is going to lean you towards quite an extraordinary polyphonic system. So while you've got individual stereo VCAs going on, you can also link them together to create a stereo 4-channel mixer. Both of these modules are going to be going onto my test bench quite soon, I hope, to give them a run through to see what makes them tick and see how useful they can be in also developing a larger polyphonic system. Now all I only need is a quad, some kind of quad VCO. I wonder whether the Disting EX can provide such a thing. But, I mean, gorgeous. Just look at them. BlakNblue. Brilliant name. Really like that. BlakNblue. It's quite good. That's my stomach. The Wyvern is a new module from Malstrom. Now, Malstrom Audio sent me the Mandrake kick drum right over here. Fair while ago now, and I still absolutely am intending to do a full proper video on it because it's a gorgeous kick drum with a ton of control in what is a very elegant and beautiful looking module. The Wyvern, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. Wyvern, it could be. Wyvern, who knows? Anyway, this is a stereo saturation controller. The idea is that the Wyvern, it holds a great big bucket of warmth and it can pour it all over your audio signals in different and interesting ways. You have a lot of control over how that's filtered, how that sounds, how that sort of beds its way in with either a gentleness or a full-on feeling of saturation, warmthness, of tubeness, of valveness all over your audio signals. You can use it as a filter, you can use it as tone controls and EQ, or you can just apply the drive, push into it, shape your sound, and it's a sound designer's dream of a module. I think you'll find it's a great thing to set on the end of your mix, right at the end, just to give everything a deep level of chewiness. Sounds like they've started up the jam over there now and all the builders are just going nuts. That's hilarious. Anyway, meantime, back in this hard-working video studio of mine, totally isolated from the real world, we've got the Archaea Modular Synthesis Exchange. Now this has a telephone on it, which makes you think, what is it? But what it is, right, is a matrix mixer. It is 8 in, 8 out, with lots of programmable ability to repatch itself all over the place. You can run 2 of them together for 16 in out if you want. Now, matrix mixers, they can be a struggle because you've got to think about what it is you're doing and where you're going. You also got to have a plan. Having a plan is something that matrix mixers like. But this is, I mean, it's nice, it's small, it has lots of lovely light up buttons and lots of potential to show you exactly what is going from where to where at the touch of a button. Very programmable, very easy to switch between things, and ultimately gives you a way of repatching your modular without having to really do anything. In some ways you need to have lots of modular to run it through, to have all these different options, to have your filter go one way or to another, or to one filter or to another filter, or to route audio signals from here to there to those effects and back in again, or to route those modulators to something else. But anyway, the Exchange is looking very, very useful. Now, Erik Oostveen has been making extraordinary Eurorack modules for some time. It makes these drone things, these other synthesizer voice type modules, and they're just beautiful. I love the aesthetic he uses. He uses a lot of manga inspired or sci-fi inspired artwork that is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I have many times hovered over the buy button for some of these modules because they just look extraordinary and could be extraordinary. But anyway, he seems to have stopped all of that shenanigans and is now embarking on a new thing called Steam Modular. Steam, which I believe is a slight extension to STEM in that it adds arts, which I think is totally genius. So you've got science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, which is absolutely where it should be. That is totally where it should be. I'm all for that. And he's doing this thing called Steam Modular. And the first project off the ground is called Eurohiker. Now, I don't fully get the entire concept of everything exactly, but what I understand of this is it's a large module with a big, large screen. It's got a number of inputs and outputs, which allows you to connect it to different things. This is with an educational focus. So not only is it connecting to Eurorack, but it uses the Eurorack format to connect to MIDI and to electroacoustic stuff and to other bits and pieces in order to demonstrate how sound works, how synthesis works in an educational situation. Now, the Eurohiker comes with all sorts of things. It's a Eurorack version of something called the Unihiker, which is a single open source board computer by BF Robot. It comes with all sorts of stuff like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, accelerometers, microphones, audio inputs and outputs, CV in and out, MIDI in and out, and all sorts of connections around the back. The idea at the moment is that it just makes a manga character dance, but I think it's going to be more than that. It's got a touchscreen interface which is going to give you access to all sorts of deep level, interesting, exploratory bits and pieces. Anything that you can write in kind of an old language like Python can be thrown up on the screen. There is other stuff coming along as well at some point, including sort of pattern generators and sequencers and all sorts of lovely bits and pieces. But to kick it off with this crazy dancing module is just, I guess, a proof of concept and showing how the development is going and pushing it forward out there. It's a great endeavour. I wish Erik all the best with it, and I can't wait to see further developments of his Steam Modular idea. I've only just found out about this one, literally this morning, and this is Tetrachords from Cycle Instruments. It's been years and years in the making, apparently, but this is a 4-track CV and MIDI note sequencer. It's just a sequencer, but it looks very interesting. It's got these whacking great big light up buttons on it. It's got a dial-y thing in the middle with lights going around it, which is very much like the qTone that I talked about last month and I have in my rack here. I like circular things. Circular things are good. But in watching the video, very briefly as I have done, about how it works, you seem to be able to bring in all sorts of notes or all sorts of qualities to chords on the fly as you're going, which is quite interesting. I think the focus is very much on melody and harmonics, which is where all these adding additional notes to your sequence as it goes kind of comes from. It's got all those weird words in it like Phrygian and Lydian and other bits and pieces that get a bit scary unless you're an accomplished guitarist or someone who knows all about music theory. But hey, I am open to knowing about these things and always keen to learn. But as a module in and of itself, it looks pretty extraordinary, and with a bit of luck they're going to be sending me one. I'll be able to tell you all about it. And lastly, in this section, before I move on to what I've decided to do, right, is because modular sometimes gets out of hand, and there's some great modular that comes out that perhaps isn't exactly good to talk about for 5 minutes in its own slot, but I want to point out a lot of modules that have arrived that are cool and interesting, but they might just be a VCA or there might be something quite simple, but that's all good. And I want to, highlight these things because people working in modular, they deserve every single little bit of encouragement and publicity that they can get their hands on. And so in a moment I'm going to dive into half a dozen or so modules just to point them out as awesome things to look at this week. But before I do, I've got these two little monsters just turned up in the post. What the heck are they? I don't know, but this one, I think it might be upside down, or is it this one? This one's upside down. These are from the Spherical Sound Society, who have been trading since 1788, at least it says so on their website. And what are they? I better have a look. You've got Fluorine, which is a futuristic generative synthesizer, and you've got ONO-SENDAI, which is a generative groove box. So I imagine the two of these together would be quite extraordinary, I should think. Generative synth, generative rhythms. Fantastic. I haven't plugged them in yet. No idea what they sound like, but they're very naked and extraordinary. I like the screen, the way it's been sort of tilted upwards just because it's got a set on a patch socket. I think that's rather cool. So these are interesting things. I'll try to do some videos on it fairly soon, at the very least, something on Instagram, if not more. But thanks for sending those over. I'm going to give those a look. And if you are a manufacturer, a developer, or somebody who's producing interesting little bits and pieces that you'd like me to show, then just get in touch. Send them in. More the merrier. I've got boxes stacked high over here of things I haven't looked at yet. So if you want to get in on that action, send me some stuff. Send me more stuff. I like it. And with a bit of luck, I will try to get through it. Now I've got one more I've just remembered as I put that down, and that's this. This is from CB Electronics. I haven't even looked at this yet, but this is an extraordinary patch bay. A patch bay for Eurorack. It's a flipping solid piece of work is what this is. Look at that. The ER patch 1632. There's that part to it. And then there's a control part of it, which is this, called the ER processor. Now this appears to have a bunch of triggers, 1 to 8. It has an Ethernet cable, which is quite frightening, to be honest. Ethernet cable, size of that, sticking out the back there. That's quite extraordinary. And then USB and MIDI in and out. It's got a screen. Get a feeling that this is going to be deep, menu driven and interesting. Got a data wheel. Oh dear. That could be quite exciting. And a home button. So these two things, I believe, are designed to run together as the most extraordinary patch bay for Eurorack you can possibly imagine. So you've got 16 by 16 inputs and outputs. I mean, we were talking about the Exchange by a little moment ago that's got 8 in and out. This is 16 in and out. Plus more by the sounds of things. So interesting. This seems to be something which people are fascinated with at the moment. How to kind of either to route or create presets within Eurorack that can be easily shuffled about and accessed. So yes, I'll also be looking at this sometime soon also. So that's good. Something to look forward to. So in my mega modular roundup then, in order to round things off, I've got a whole bunch. Let's kick off then with the Dnipro qTone. qTone is quantiser, gorgeous looking quantiser, really, really nice. 2 channels with up to 16 user-defined scales. Just dial it in, off you go. It's also an arpeggiator, which I think is absolutely vital in a quantiser. Quantizers should always be arpeggiators. It's something I use over here in the quantiser from Mosaic, my 1U quantiser here. I use it as an arpeggiator very, very often. Just sticking some notes and off it goes. It's fantastic. That's absolutely what they should be doing. But this is a beautiful looking module. It's in 6 HP. Looks very, very simple to use. In and out. What more could you possibly need? You can either link the channels so they're using the same scale or use them completely independently for 2 different scales. Fantastic. Quantiser. qTone from Dnipro. Next up is Endline from Clank. It's a bridge to another world, apparently. Clank do some great stuff, really interesting, sort of quirky and bizarre sort of modules that just have a really very pro, minimalist, and yet full of vim type modules. What am I talking about? Oh, I don't know. This is a sum mixer. I've had one of those recently. The output bus from DivKid. Is this the same idea? This is more of an output module, I would say. No, I wouldn't say that. In fact, I would say it's very, very similar to the DivKid output bus. That's interesting. How do these things all come along together at the same time? It's evidently something that we need. It's going to take in signals from things like mixers and other bits and pieces and just sum them together. Rather than giving you faders or knobs to control the levels independently, you've just got all of the inputs and they get summed beautifully within the module itself and then give you several output options. Particular features of the Endline include a couple of auxiliary sends, one in mono, one in stereo, with returns. So that means you can loop in through various effects before you hit the main output. It has balance outputs, headphone output, all the things you need in order to connect it, as they say, to the other world. From At1 Modular, we have the Quad VCA. Nothing spectacular to tell you about, particularly. It's just 4-channel VCA. It's nicely narrow. It's not too wide. Often VCAs, or Quad VCAs at the very least, take up a lot of space. But this is 4 knobs, 4 inputs, 4 outputs, 4 CV inputs. Simple, useful, absolutely an everyday sort of Quad VA kind of module. Good job. Then we have the Dark Star from Frequency Central. Now, Dark Star, of course, is that 1974 film by John Carpenter. It's probably one of my favourite films of all time, except for everything probably that came after it. But at the time, when I was 4 years old, I didn't see it when I was 4. I remember seeing it, though, as a kid, and thinking it was just... it was fantastic. It's these kind of half-stoned astronauts in space trying to blow up planets, and it was just really cool because it was not like any other sci-fi. It wasn't worthy. It wasn't full of moralizing or big expansive ideas. It was these sort of bunch of losers who were just arsing about the galaxy, having to knock out a couple of planets for some reason, and then they had a big argument with a bomb, and somebody had a fight with a big orange plastic balloon. But I liked it. Anyway, so what's this? I don't know. I mean, it's some kind of synthesizer, I think. This is from Frequency Central, who produce kits, so you have to build the thing, but this is an entire synthesizer voice in only 16 HP, which is very cool. It's the sort of thing they do well, I think. It looks good and simple. You've got an oscillator, you've got a filter, you've got something called a release generator of some kind. That's probably some sort of envelope if you think about it hard enough. It's got a sweep, it's got drive, it's got resonance, and it's all going to be farting around in its own little universe. AM Synths have just released 2 vintage transistor based modules, one of which is a triple LFO, the other one is a triple VCA. They definitely look inspired by Buchla modules and offer the same sort of level of quality that we've come to expect from AM Synths. Apparently the triple modulator is actually based on a lost module from the original ARP 2500. It has 3 discrete 4-quadrant modulators that provide ring modulation, mixing and VCA capabilities. Whereas the VCA is just that little bit more straightforward and does kind of what it says on the tin. Blue Lantern are forever releasing modules. I think every week they've got something new out. This time it's a couple of filters. One of them is called the Acid and Sons 3109 VCF, which probably sounds exactly as you imagine it would. And the other is the Salamander Egg Maker. What the heck does that mean? I don't know, but it looks like a really sort of big knob type filter thing. It says it's based on a 1974 SEM filter, which brings us back to our Dark Star, of course. So while you could have been watching John Carpenter's spacey masterpiece, you could also have been filtering on a SEM synthesizer. In fact, probably John used a SEM directly onto the soundtrack of Dark Star, which of course would make perfect sense and bring us in a full circle of synergy. But anyway, the Salamander Egg Maker also has a VCA inside, making it nice and easy. That seems to be a bit of a trait at the moment, getting filters with built-in VCAs, just to make things that little bit simpler. But not only that, it also has a decay envelope stuck in there as well, making things even simpler, assuming that you just like to fiddle around in one module. So yeah, very interesting. And another quite prolific modular company is Feedback Modules. Now they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Six additional modules this month. They've got a feedback module. They've got 2 of those, in fact. No. That's their name, Dipstick. They've got a VCA 100, simple, colourful, apparently, VCA. They've got the reset, which is an on-off button. Okay. They've got the magic ring, which is a ring modulator based on a logic chip, but with a twist. They've got slow signs, 4 free-running analog LFOs. Nice. 4 times mute switch, 4 channels. And the plus and minus 18 dB, which is a signal and CFE amplifier and attenuator. Cool. Always new stuff coming from them. And that, I think, concludes our little modular roundup. So great, that'll do, I think. That's plenty. Plenty. Lots to do. Must get on. I should, of course, mention Super Booth coming up in a couple of weeks. There's going to be lots and lots of coverage. Not by me, though. By golly, no, I'll do my one afterwards. So that's a big relief for me. I can just enjoy it. Sadly, I will not be there. I simply can't afford. I can't afford to go. Maybe next year, but I'll be watching and enjoying what it is that's coming out and not writing about it, which is also quite exciting. In fact, I have some plans to do some particularly special things on those days for myself, not for you, for myself. Otherwise, in the realms of reviews and videos, I have got no end to it. Now, I appreciate that in March, I think it was, I did like 5 times more videos than I've done in ages, and that felt really good. Got a lot of stuff out there, fantastic. Then in April, I've done like 1 video on the disting. That's about it. And I'm sorry about that. However, this is kind of going to have to be the ebb and flow of things from now on, I think, because there are times I need to spend seriously head down writing articles about synthesizers and music technology and fabulous things for magazines and websites in order to keep myself alive and to keep the family fed. And that's great, and I'm enjoying that. And this week, for instance, I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do for Careers in Music. I've got a whole load of reviews to do for Sound on Sound magazine, so those are evidently very important. And some of those will spill into videos, some of them won't. But I do hope to be covering a lot of stuff very, very, very soon, because I do get a week that opens up into bits and pieces that lets me really get stuck into some interesting videos. So lots to come. Just gazing at this landscape of boxes I have. Some fabulous stuff coming down the line, so do stay tuned, do subscribe, do join us on Patreon. On Patreon, right, you can get this video absolutely advert free. If you're sick to death of YouTube adverts, then pop along to Patreon, sign up as a $0 follower, and you can watch this video for free. A bit late to tell you now, of course, you've already watched it, but hey, you can do that every month. You can watch the Molten Music Monthly for free on Patreon for $0. And then if you fancy throwing me a couple of quid, then you absolutely can, and you get access to all of the videos that I make advert free, and other bits and pieces as well sometimes that you won't get to see on any other platform. So that's very exciting. Patreon, come and join us, give us a couple of quid. It's the way of the future, it's the way to go, and it supports me in making videos. That's great. Is that it? Is that everything? Can't think of anything else. Oh, all right, live stream Sunday night. Yeah, why not? We're talking about May now, aren't we? May the 5th, could be 5th of May, something like that. Yeah, let's do that. Let's have a live stream. It will be our pre-Super Booth live stream. We can talk about what we think might be coming along, and I can demonstrate you things like these crazy synths and other bits and pieces that have turned up recently, assuming they're the ones that I'm allowed to, that are not embargoed until after Super Booth. I'll try not to mess that up. So that'll do. Hope that was useful. Take care of yourselves. In the meantime, go and make some tunes.